Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Winning Streak. I'm your host, Bryson, and today I'm breaking down what every single NFL team needs to do this offseason. Kind of just like a basic overview of every team as well, and going into next season. Before I start, I want to go over free agents going into next season because you're going to hear me mention specific teams that should pick them up throughout the video. So starting off with receivers, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman Jr., Mike Evans, Marquise Brown, Calvin Ridley, Darnell Mooney, and Gabe Davis are available. And as for running backs, DeAndre Swift, Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, thank God, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, DeAndre Swift, and Travis Etienne are available. So, I mean, these guys, I'm pretty sure all can get franchise tagged, but I'm assuming the only ones that like for sure would be like McCaffrey. Obviously, like you don't have a choice there. Maybe Swift, maybe ETN. I think they're gonna let Derrick Henry roam free. Tony Pollard should not be franchise tagged. Austin Eckler might be, just because he's a core piece to a team that should be successful next season. Saquon probably won't be. Gabe Davis won't be. Mooney won't be. Oh, they're going to have to pick between Ridley and ETN probably, so that's something. Marquise Brown probably won't be. Evans maybe. Pittman, no. T. Higgins, no. So, getting straight into it, going to start off with two teams that are in talks right now for the same reason, being Marvin Harrison. Starting with the Bears. I said Fields was and has been very underrated and overhated for many seasons now if you actually watch the games. Justin Fields accumulated 2,562 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, along with 657 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns in 13 games played due to injury. So he missed 5 games. I don't know why I blanked there. And he missed 5 games. Those numbers aren't great, but when you take into consideration he only had 2 players who could catch the ball on offense, got to give him a break. Plus, he was sacked 44 times, which is the 5th most, and he missed 5 games. So, when you have that and a coach who sucks, you cannot write him off entirely, I don't think. The Bears do have the first overall pick locked up, and I mean, they have the opportunity to get Marvin Harrison Jr. along with another first-round pick just a few teams later. So they have a huge chance to draft and trade for O-line and defense, which they should absolutely do. They should, for sure, I think, get Marvin Harrison. You have DJ Moore. So a guy who's on a rookie contract and a guy who I'm pretty sure isn't on a super bad contract. You have Cole Kmet, who is also not on a bad contract. Justin Fields, you can argue about his contract depending if you like him or not. And then you bring in O-line and defense, and you bring in a guy like Mike Evans or T. Higgins or Calvin Ridley on a decent contract. He's pretty set to succeed. So, as for the Cardinals have tons of potential, as we've seen, since they actually got a quarterback in the game now. They got Kyler Beck. And they're just a little bit short from a competitive season, I think. I think next season is going to be a really big season for them and they're going to succeed. But firstly, they should look into trading and acquiring O-line, defense, and another higher-end receiver. I'm talking like a good receiver, though, like Stephon Diggs or something like that. Even though I don't actually think Stephon Diggs is good. But as for O-line, if Marvin Harrison Jr. is available, obviously you're going to go get him. But if not, I think it's pronounced Olu Fashanu. If I butchered his name, my bad. But I think you draft him first round with your pick, and then go for Neighbors or Keon Coleman with the second pick in the first round that you have from the Texans, which unfortunately will be a later pick as they had a really good season. Pair them with that fast-paced offense, and you got a hard team to stop next season on offense. And as for defense, they already did a fantastic job drafting a young core. If you know football, you know that's true. And so you just have to add to that as strategically as possible. Just build around the core you have right now. Trust Kyler, I think, honestly, and see what you got. Falcons. That's a bad one. Falcons as a team, franchise, fan base are virtually unheard of by now for good reason. They're a stinker team. That being said, it's time to look into restarting. I think you settle for a decent coach if you can't find a high-level guy, and then just trade what you can for good assets and get ready for a rough 2 to 4 seasons. Added to that, while you patiently build a Super Bowl team. It's honestly debatable whether they should start with rebuilding the offense or defense, and I say it depends on who's available. So, I mean, it's kind of hard. If you can get like Penix or Williams, start strong, but if not, you just have to look at like starting the defensive rebuild first. Also, mainly because you have Bijan Robinson. So, realistically, you're obviously going to build around him. Like, without Arthur Smith, there's no reason not to. And if you're not willing to wait and rebuild, trade for Russ, honestly. Russell Wilson, that is, if you're not picking up on that. And just go all out for his last 1 to 2 years to provide him with what he needs. You can pick up 2 free agent receivers, try to get as crazy of a defense as possible, and just see if you can build a team as quick as you can for him and for your franchise. I don't think it's a horrible idea, especially as like the GM or whatever of the team, the owner of the team. Like, I think you just, like in his position, I'm going all out to spend everything we can, get as close to the Super Bowl as possible, try to get in there, and then just retire. So we'll see what they do. I don't see much potential in the next few years whatsoever, but they could change something around, I guess. I just don't see what they could do to keep up with these teams right now. The Ravens, this one seems fairly obvious. By the way, there's no like specific order I'm going in. I'm just kind of going with whichever teams I thought of first. So this one seems fairly obvious. This team doesn't need much at all. They've had an amazing season and look to do so again next year. Many may not realize, but the Ravens aren't even playing as good as they can. Next year, they'll have Andrews back, along with Lamar, Flowers, Odell, and the same unreal defense, I would imagine. However, the only main expected difference is coming from the running back position. At this point, they built a whole roster of running backs alone. They have like 6 guys right now who could be starting on certain teams. They're just not all like at a super high level, I guess. But as for next year, they should absolutely, and I hate to say this, but they should absolutely do anything possible in order to pick up the free agent King Derrick Henry for an absolutely easy Super Bowl ticket. And they are one of 2 teams that I think could end up with him. I'll get into the second team that will win a Super Bowl if they get him later. But first, getting into the Bills, absolute hit or miss team. They're either being talked about as Super Bowl contenders or complete frauds, and there's no in between. I do feel sympathy for that, as it's annoying to be a fan for things like that, but I'll still be honest, they're not really that good in my opinion at all. Josh Allen isn't bad at all, but overrated by a lot of people. And as for the team, the only major change that I can see happening and think should happen is, as crazy as it sounds, moving on from Stephon Diggs. He's constantly and consistently an overrated locker room cancer, and he does nothing but put his teammates down half the time, and the Bills need to move on from that if they want to compete, in my opinion. So, yes, it's hard to see me as correct when he's the team star, but if you can trade him for a mid or high-end receiver and get another decent asset like a pick, you could very well be looking at a Super Bowl in New York. So it's up to them what they want to do on that one, but it's interesting. Oh, sorry about that. But moving on to the Panthers, the worst team in the NFL. If you watch them this season, you know what I'm thinking. They're terrible. Luckily for them, they already started rebuilding, and they're starting young, and literally, they have Bryce Young. And while that could unfortunately not work out and backfire on them, it could work out also in the next few years. So, first things first, don't be too concerned about Bryce Young. Yes, his stats are pretty bad as he threw for 2,877 yards and 11 touchdowns with 10 interceptions. But, and he was sacked an insane 62 times, which is gross, which was the second most. And I think this year, focus on O-line and defense. I'm going to say that a lot throughout this video just so you guys know. Because that's basically the only thing holding certain teams back. And I think you focus on O-line and defense specifically with the 6 total picks you have this year. And then you look into bringing in guys like T. Higgins or maybe even Derrick Henry if you're trying to start big in the offseason. And Derrick Henry is a cheap running back. I don't know if you guys know this or realize this, but I'm pretty sure he's less than a $4 million a year guy. I could be wrong, but when I was looking up his contract yesterday, I think it was like $5 million or less that he's on per year, which is honestly insane for the value he could provide for you. So I think in the offseason, considering you'll have good money to spend, you look into that. And then same thing next year as well. Just hope everyone can stay healthy. Just try to draft good again or try to win this year if you can be like what I said for the Falcons and pick up enough. I also said look into moving on from Adam Thielen. He had a great early season this year, but he's 33 years old. He just had a really good season, so if you can get something good for him, I would do it while you can. So, moving on to the Bengals. Sorry for all you guys, for fans this year. That's a rough season. But if you're the Bengals or a fan, you know it was a rough season. Joe Burrow going down along with Chase for a while really impacted the season and ruined it. There's still lots of hope, so keep your hopes up. For starters, I'm going with the obvious one. We all know Joe Burrow needs more of an offensive line. Considering your offense is pretty much set, I think you keep the core of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Joe Mixon together, while unfortunately moving on from T. Higgins and actually keeping Tyler Boyd over T. Higgins. Higgins is going to want a big contract, and Boyd can't ask for a big contract because he's not even near the level of T. Higgins, honestly. So I think you just keep him. And then as for the draft, I think if Brock Bowers, not that they have a bad tight end, but if Brock Bowers falls to you and you're the Bengals, I think it's possible, and I think I'm taking him if I'm the Bengals in that position. But if not, I'm looking to just get the best O-line and defense possible because they have 7 picks this year, which is actually crazy. I think they're the only team that has that. And apart from that, I think you just keep everything the same unless you're trading for O-line or defense. That's the only reason I would trade someone this year. So the Browns, this one's a fun one because this is going to be a good little segment for Instagram. Super long paragraph for this one. I do have the whole thing scripted out. Let me get ready for this one. The Browns are in a great but also terrible situation next year. And here's what I mean. When I say great, I mean they have Nick Chubb, who arguably could have been McCaffrey Mostert level. Amari Cooper, who proved he could be great. And David Njoku, who looks like he's the best tight end in the league right now. Paired with a top 3 O-line and defense. It's an absolutely amazing team that needs literally nothing. But the literally only problem on this team, and possibly the biggest problem they could have, which is unfortunate for them, comes from the QB room. So many people aren't really looking at this right now, but as the Browns, on one hand, you have a guy on a $230 million contract who took the season off to kick back and relax, but could still have lots of potential. We don't really know at this point. And on the other hand, you have a 38-year-old man who was quite literally kicking back and relaxing all season, but since you picked him up, he's been an MVP-level quarterback in the past month, in many people's opinion. So the question is, from me, what do you do in this situation? Because if you start Watson, it could and probably would kill Flacco's drive to play, and he may even retire on a good note after this season as he's old and injury-prone. So he might just want to go out with a bang. And then, where was I? But Watson is also very prone to injury. So if that were to happen, they'd have no one. But then again, if you start Flacco next season, it's nearly the same situation. And you'd have a $230 million backup quarterback, which I don't think that's ever happened or ever will. It could also just kill his drive to play, even if he even has any left. And it's just a risk overall. So, I mean, it's honestly a huge problem for them right now. And I think people need to start looking more into this, because if they tried to trade Watson, who's going to take Deshaun Watson, who hasn't even played on his $230 million contract yet, really? And when he did play, he was arguably bad. But obviously, most teams, I wouldn't think, are going to want to trade for a 38-year-old. So you might be stuck with both, unless you, for some reason, decide to trade for a, legit, they're legit QB, or figure something else out. But I don't really know what they'll do in that situation, so I guess we'll see. Moving on to my team, the Cowboys. So as a Cowboys fan, it's been a very confusing season. The only main flaws we have are insanely noticeable. For starters, Tony Pollard is playing at an RB2 level. So my thoughts are that we do the obvious and pick up Mr. King, Derrick Henry, on a 1 to 3 year contract, as he's been quite the cheap player for his performance the last few years. And with that, I mean, assuming we franchise tag Pollard, I guess, we could have speed in Pollard, power in Rico Dowdle, and then have both in Derrick Henry, paired up with Dak Prescott, who is arguably the MVP this year, CeeDee Lamb, who is arguably the best receiver in the league this year, and our O-line and defense, which is arguably the best the past couple years and this year. So, I mean, I don't see why you don't go for Derrick Henry if you're us, but we'll see about that. And the only problem, apart from that with the team, is the amazing defense. They have the potential to be generational, which arguably they are, but they're, in my opinion, they're too inconsistent. My main 2 points being that we need more help with defensive coordination. Our defensive coordinator, he does his job, but he needs help out there, I think. And with that will come a better / more consistent rush defense. So I think our rush defense sucks. We've only been beaten by the rush game, if that may be absolutely wrong. But in my opinion and memory, this season we've only lost to the rush game. It is true, I think. We lost to the Dolphins because of their rush game, I think, for the most part. We lost to the Cardinals because of James Conner. We lost to the Bills because I think James Cook had 2 touchdowns on us. So, I mean, you got to pick it up at some point. But, oh my God, Nick Saban just retired? Wow. That's insane. This is bad timing, but that is insane. Nick Saban has retired. Wow. Getting back into it, we just need a coach who will put Parsons and D-Law at the containing edge against good run teams, and then put Micah in coverage as a middle linebacker against teams that are better with passing, and then move Gilmore out more. So I think we'll be fine, and if we do end up getting a free agent running back this offseason, I think it's our, Cowboys stereotypical fan aside, it would be our year next year if we got a better running back. So, getting into the Broncos, I don't have much for them. I think you look into moving on from Sean Payton, as crazy as it sounds, since you just got him, and then either use the system how you should or look into trading Russ to Atlanta, along with sending your other good players for other assets and just rebuilding your team. Without drastic changes this offseason, I don't see any potential, so I don't see why you would want to play out a few more losing seasons rather than just make sure you can rebuild your team during that time. So, Lions, this one's going to be a little bit of a hot take. The Lions, for starters, obvious answer is more defense. I also think there's more you can do, though. This may sound delusional and crazy to many people, but it will play out either with the Lions or with another team that gets this player. So just watch. I said the Detroit Lions should look into starting Hendon Hooker over Jared Goff next season. So, hear me out. I know he's an injured rookie who didn't even play this season, but the dude was, in my opinion, the clear, easy-cut Heisman before he got injured in college. He was having an insane season at Tennessee, and he was absolutely amazing. The dude was, like, flawless in multiple games that I watched. And Jared Goff is very good, don't get me wrong, but if you gave Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and the Lions a young, mobile, former Heisman, should have been, I think they'd be an entirely new and better and more fun team and system, and they would be just at an even higher level, being an extra young elite team. So they could be at that elite level for years to come, or they could wait for Hooker. Up to them, but I think they really should look into starting him. For the Packers, I don't know how much more I have. There's quite a few more. The Packers have an insanely bright future ahead of them. Jordan Love is quite literally putting up better stats than Aaron Rodgers did last season on the Packers, and he looks like he's a perfect fit in the system, mainly because of Rodgers, though. However, the team around him is rather weak. Luckily, the receiving core around him is already good as well as young, and my only fix there, as you will hear and have heard a lot, is bring in T. Higgins. I think he's a perfect fit for Green Bay, specifically. For running backs, they're good. A.J. Dillon and I forgot his name, Aaron something, but they're just super inconsistent and very, very injury prone, which I wouldn't bother to trust next year. There's many free agent running backs next year, so I think they go for Saquon or ETN, and along with that, repairing the O-line and adding to the already underrated defense could make them a complete team in less than a year or two. So, moving on to the... Where was I? Oh, moving on to the only other team that I think has a brighter future than the Packers. The Houston Texans have the brightest future far and away, in my opinion, which they could still add to. They have a rookie QB who's arguably an MVP runner, which is insane, unheard of, and a decent team all around him. The only things they could really use in a set in stone consistent running back, as in Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift, Travis Etienne, or someone who they get in the draft, which likely would not end up benefiting them, because I don't think there's going to be any running backs that deep in the draft. But if they add to their defense, since it's young and weak, honestly, and maybe a tiny bit more O-line, as C.J. Stroud was the 8th most sacked QB this year. But apart from that, their coaching is spectacular right now, and they shouldn't be concerned for the future at all. Unless something goes down, they have a very promising future. So, the Colts. I said the Colts definitely surprised lots of people this year, so y'all may hate me for this, but it's realistic. I think that rather than hoping the team gears will be able to click in the next couple years, leading them to a championship, which I put impossible, I think they should just accept the fact that they don't have enough on offense or defense to actually do something, and they should just start fresh and work up to it. They should firstly trade Jonathan Taylor, which I was saying before his contract, and I also put, even though he's on this fresh contract, but I put either do that or build around him, I guess. Shouldn't realistically, because it's kind of risky in my opinion. But they draft the best QB possible at their spot and just start by gaining assets and trading people. And the only reason I'm keeping Pittman if I'm them is if he takes a super mid contract, because I don't think he's worth a super good contract. I think he is going to be a Chief next year, and I hope this ends up right, because that'd be pretty fun to watch. So, moving on to the Jags. I I would say top 3 hardest ones for me. The hardest teams for me to talk about in this video was the Eagles, Dolphins, and Jags. Because all I can really say is hope that the offense stays healthy for the Jags so far. Hope the offense stays healthy, get more defense and O-line, I guess, and just make sure Trevor isn't a bust. Like, I kind of have a blank mind for them because you look at their team and why are they so bad? Like, I can't tell, honestly. Like, I guess you could say injuries, but for them, I just don't really know. I didn't watch enough Jags games, I guess, also to have a super good opinion on them, but that's what I said at least. And then the Chiefs, the most obvious one and the shortest one probably. Chiefs need to bring in Michael Pittman or Marquise Brown, and they're set. Literally just anyone who can catch by this point. Other than that, keep the team together, make sure Kelsey doesn't suck again next year, and make sure your offensive coordinator does not suck next year. So, moving on to the Raiders. The Raiders have the potential to make some noise for sure, but changes need to be made. The coaching seems to have been pretty much fixed, but as for the rest of the team, it's arguable. If possible, the Raiders should firstly try to move on, and I don't like saying this because I like the dude. I want to get him on the podcast. I think he has potential, but he's not the guy for them. They should move on from Aiden O'Connell already and try to get a first-round quarterback if there's a good enough one available at their spot. Penix, arguably Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy even maybe, and just start that quarterback off with Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers and Josh Jacobs. And it's a pretty good setup. But in my opinion, they should really look into replacing Devontae Adams. I don't think they should. I wouldn't in their position, but considering he's practically a New York Jet already, like the dude's going to do everything he can to play with Aaron Rodgers again, I think. But realistically, there is a lot of potential there. The Chargers. Give me a second for this one. Chargers only need a new coach. And maybe running back if they think Eckler isn't good enough next year or he leaves. Other than that, I literally think they just need Bill Belichick or Harbaugh, and they're set. Because that team is literally built to be an elite, like, superstar team. Like, you have 3 receivers who are really good. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, if Mike Williams can stay healthy. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and hopefully Quentin Johnson next year. You have Austin Eckler, who was arguably the best running back in the league last year. Pretty good tight end, honestly. And then O-line could be better. Defense is pretty dang good already. It's a lot of health issues with them, honestly. But I do think they just really need a coach next year, and they're set. But the Rams, unfortunately, I do think need to do a QB search this upcoming season if they really want to improve with their young team. Other than that, it's just defense updates and upgrades to keep up against other stacked offenses. But the squad of Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Kyron Williams, along with Higbee, is an undercover elite group, I said. So, the Dolphins, same situation as the Jaguars. I don't even know that they actually have a genuine, like, noticeable weak spot. But all I can say is they need to keep up in real games against teams that matter, like good teams, as they struggle bad against even decent teams. So overall, the stuff they need is up to each individual player because you can't coach heart and the will to win. But the only team they really beat this season is the Cowboys that I can think of off the top of my head. They got blown out by the Ravens, just blown out by a few other teams in general, and the Cowboys game was super close. So moving on to the Vikings, at this point, they need literally everything except a star receiver and tight end. Unfortunately for the team, apart from coaching, kind of, the team just sucks, and I wouldn't even be surprised to see their stars on new teams next season or in a couple seasons. Jefferson and Hawkinson, that would be. So perhaps it's rebuild time for the Vikings. They had a decent run of trying to get close, but they never ended up doing it. The Patriots, undoubtedly rebuild time. Just get straight into it. Not only do they have to rebuild every aspect of their team, but it seems like they might be stupid enough to get rid of Belichick this offseason. So I don't really have much for them. They suck really bad. I wish the Cowboys kept Ezekiel Elliott. But overall, I guess we'll see what road they go down after they pick Drake May. We'll see what happens. So the Saints honestly have no hope for the next few years, in my opinion, which might sound crazy to some people, unless they can get a star quarterback paired with a great O-line and defense the next 2 or 3 years and keep the core the same around that, which is almost impossible. But I said if they can't do that, they might need to rebuild too. And then as for the next team, I said the same thing 3 times in a row, being rebuild time. The Giants should not re-sign Saquon under any means. There's no point at this point. You've never done anything with him, so don't expect to. So I just put do not sign Saquon and rebuild. I have nothing else to say. Y'all in pretty deep. It's not looking good. The Jets, one of my favorite teams next season to win it all. It's a crazy take, actually. Just get some more O-line and a tiny bit more defense. Draft both this year. Just don't draft anything except O-line and defense, I think. Start with O-line for your first 3 picks and then go for defense. Do anything possible to keep Aaron Rodgers healthy so he can play more than 3 snaps and win a Super Bowl again next year, and do literally anything you can to get Devontae Adams back to him. So I think the Jets are going to be my Super Bowl favorite next year, regardless of what happens this offseason. If they get Devontae, draft, like I said, and keep Rodgers healthy, easy Super Bowl. Breece Hall's elite. Garrett Wilson is elite. Their defense was elite until they gave up. So I see a lot of potential there. The Eagles, same as the Dolphins and Jaguars, just put together the little things that matter and then mainly get new coordinators. I know you lost, I think, your head offensive and defensive coordinator after the Super Bowl. So you could tell. So I think they just really need to go for that mainly. The Steelers, literally all you need to be a championship team is a quarterback, I think. The only other thing that might be slightly holding you back is a running back, which already shouldn't be an issue in my opinion, but regardless, it's an easy fix. This offseason especially. They could even be a team that goes for Henry. And if they got a running back to pair up with George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Freiermuth, decent O-line and amazing defense, I think you're set. 49ers, y'all are set. You don't need anything if you can keep the team together. Just learn how to stay consistent and maybe coaching help, I guess. The Seahawks, I said, keep the offensive core together, but draft a quarterback. You're at a decent spot to get a decent quarterback this year. JJ McCarthy could fall to the Seahawks and be paired with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Kenneth Walker in his first year. Plus, that defense is not bad at all. So, I really do like their potential. I think they could also be a championship level team with a better quarterback. Not that Geno's bad, but let's be honest. The Buccaneers need to build their defense a little bit more as a whole and get Baker a little bit more O-line because he was the 6th most sacked quarterback this year. Grab a receiver for sure if Evans were to leave, but if not, you don't really need to. And then just get some coaching help as well. So the Buccaneers are a really good team. I love the Buccaneers, so I hope they can do something next year. And then my last 2 teams, firstly, the Titans. I said do not re-sign Derrick Henry. There's no point now, or no point by now, as you've had plenty of chances with him, especially in the playoffs as well. And you couldn't succeed then, so the next few seasons, there's no chance. Trade DeAndre Hopkins for as much as possible, and then just rebuild, because you don't have anything to build around. As the Tennessee Titans, they are probably going to be a super irrelevant team come the next 2 to 3 years, in my opinion, because I don't see how they could rebuild quick enough to do anything. But I guess, yeah, I mean, just don't re-sign Henry and trade D-Hop and rebuild at this point. The Commanders, this one might come off as a shock, actually, because considering how much I've said other teams should rebuild, I think the Commanders, this is going to sound crazy, but I do think the Commanders are an elite, like ready to be elite. I think if they sign Harbaugh or Belichick, Howell was sacked 65 times, which is the most in the league. And getting sacked 65 times is horrible. He was leading the league in yards at one point with how bad that offense and coaching was at one point. So that's already insane enough. And people don't consider him that great still, which he's not great, but he's going to be. You got to get defense, and then I guess you also could go for Brock Bowers, but you have a little too early of a pick, in my opinion, as the Commanders to go for him. But I think it could easily work out still. I think you let Sam Howell cook with the 2 great running backs you have and all the great receivers you have, honestly. You need a new coach, as Ron Rivera just got fired. You obviously need to fix the O-line, and you need more defense. So I'm trying to think now of who their tight end is, but I honestly can't. So if you get Brock Bowers in that really quick, young offense, like I already said, O-line and defense, and then get Harbaugh or Belichick, the Commanders, as crazy as it might sound, could easily make a lot of noise. So there is my take on all, I don't even know, I think 32 or something. I don't know how many NFL teams there are. But regardless, I appreciate you for watching, and I will see you next time.